Hello everyone. Today we would like to present our project on the theme Does GDP per capita affect happiness? We all know that economic growth and human happiness are fundamental topics in social sciences, and the aim of our project was to study connection between a country's GDP per capita and the happiness of its residents. And by examining data from a sample of 63 countries, we aim to understand whether there is a significant positive correlation between GDP per capita and the World Happiness Index.
So, to test the relationship between GDP per capita and the happiness, we established the following hypothesis. Null hypothesis is about there is no correlation between GDP per capita and the happiness. Mathematically, this is P equals 0, where P represents the correlation coefficient. Alternative hypothesis, there is a positive correlation between GDP per capita and the happiness. Mathematically, this is P more than 0. We structured the study to examine the correlation between GDP per capita and the World Happiness Index scores. Data for GDP per capita were obtained from the World Bank and the happiness scores from the World Happiness Report. Initially, our goal was to include data from 160 countries, but due to inconsistencies in data, we scaled back to a sample of 63 countries. Our sample was chosen through random selection, ensuring a broad representation of regions and economic backgrounds. The data set encompasses countries from multiple continents, including both high and low income regions. This study uses inferential statistics to draw conclusions about the population based on our sample data. The data in this study is continuous. Both GDP per capita and the happiness scores are numerical and can take on a range of values. We took the GDP per capita in USD as independent variable and the World Happiness Index score as dependent variable.
And during our research, we faced some challenges that we would like to talk about. First of all, it was connected with data quality. So there were many sites with different data outcomes. So we had to carefully analyze all the sources we had and use only official data to eliminate any kind of bias. The second challenge we faced was variable fluctuations. GDP per capita and happiness index are both variables that fluctuate over time. So we used data from 2017 and 2023 to capture changes in those variables. The third challenge was limitations of GDP. What we mean by that is that GDP per capita does not fully explain financial well-being of its residents. For example, factors like corruption and inequality can impact a country's prosperity.
The slope or the coefficient of x represents the expected change in the dependent variable y for each unit change in the dependent variable x. The y-intercept represents the value of the dependent variable y when the independent variable x is 0. It can be understood as a baseline or starting point for the regression line. Regression line and the coefficient of determination for 20 and 17. We derived the regression line using the least squares method to understand the linear relationship between GDP per capita and the happiness for 2017. The regression equation is y equals 4 error minus 0.5x plus 4.774, where y represents a happiness score and the x is GDP per capita. This regression line helps estimate happiness based on GDP per capita. The coefficient of correlation multiple r is equal 0.80, which means that correlation between two variables are strongly positive. The coefficient of determination was calculated to be 0.64, indicating that 64% of the variability in happiness can be explained by GDP per capita. This suggests that while GDP per capita contributes to happiness, other factors also influence it. The standard error of the estimate is 0.75, indicating some variability in the data and reinforcing the idea that GDP per capita is not the only determinant of happiness. To understand the relationship between GDP per capita and happiness for 2023, we derived the regression line using the least squares method. The regression equation is y equals 3 error minus 0.5x plus 4.653, where y represents a happiness score and the x denotes GDP per capita. This regression line allows us to estimate happiness based on GDP per capita. The coefficient of correlation is 0.743, indicating a strong positive correlation between GDP per capita and happiness, and the coefficient of determination is 0.552, suggesting that 55% of the variability in happiness can be explained by GDP per capita. And the standard error for the estimate for 2023 is 0.98. The standard error for the estimate for 2017 was 0.75, which is lower than the standard error for 2023. This suggests less variability in the 2017 data, indicating that GDP per capita had a more consistent impact on happiness in 2017 compared to 2023. These comparisons reveal that the influence of GDP per capita on happiness has slightly decreased from 2017 to 2023, with other factors playing a more significant role in determining happiness. The increase in the standard error for 2023 reinforces the idea that happiness is influenced by a broader range of variables beyond just economic wealth.
So, to test the relationship between GDP per capita and happiness index, we decided to use a test for linear correlation. Our test model is one-tailed test, as we said in our alternative hypothesis. Therefore, to test our hypothesis, we use the Pearson correlation coefficient. And the reason for our choice was the fact that Pearson correlation coefficient measures the strength and direction of the relationship between two variables. And the results of the test range between -1 and 1, indicating the direction and strength of the relationship. And the results of our test was R equal to 0.74 in 2023. So we make a decision to reject the null hypothesis, since our correlation coefficient indicates a strong positive correlation. Or otherwise, our test result is greater than our critical value, which is equal to 0.211. Our conclusion is that there is enough evidence to support the claim that there is a positive correlation between GDP per capita and happiness. We also estimated the confidence interval, and our confidence interval lies between 0.485 and 1. So depending on the information, it suggests that the correlation coefficient between these variables is significantly different from 0, and our decision to reject the null hypothesis is correct. Based on the analysis conducted, the correlation between GDP per capita and happiness levels was investigated using a one-tailed test at a 5% of level of significance. With a sample size of 63 and a calculated confidence interval, the observed correlation coefficient was determined to be within a certain range. The confidence interval, which ranged from R1 to R2, indicated that we are 95% confident that the true correlation coefficient lies within this interval. Upon examining the confidence interval, it was found that confidence interval lies between 0.48 to 1. Given that this confidence interval does not include 0, we can conclude that there is a significant positive correlation between GDP per capita and happiness levels at 5 levels of significance. Therefore, we reject the null hypothesis, which stated that there is no correlation between GDP per capita and happiness levels, in favor of the alternative hypothesis suggesting that a significant correlation does exist. This finding suggests that as GDP per capita increases, happiness levels tend to increase accordingly. However, it's essential to acknowledge that correlation does not imply causation, and other factors may also influence happiness levels independently.